Good morning, everyone. I am Frederica Williams, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to today's event. Welcome Mayor Wu, the Mayor's Office of Housing, members of the Rent Stabilization Advisory Committee, and all of our guests at today's press conference. Thank you, Mayor Wu, for building on your commitment to protect Boston renters. As a community-based healthcare and social services organization with a mission to address health equity, social justice, and the economic inequities impacting the communities we serve, safe and affordable housing has been a top priority for our team. I also know that addressing housing stability is a major concern for all of my Boston-based health center colleagues. Housing is one of the best researched social determinants of health, and selected housing interventions for low-income people have been found to improve health outcomes and decrease healthcare costs. A rent-burdened household is less likely to be able to afford sufficient food, to have access to medical care, or to seek medical treatment. In fact, a rent-burdened household is more likely to ultimately use the emergency room for medical treatment, potentially at a later date, more severe, less treatable point in the disease course. In a systematic review of scientific literature on housing stability and health, researchers noted significant associations between housing insecurity and higher body mass index, higher blood pressure, higher mental health, suicide rates, and substance abuse. The financial impact of housing instability also contributes to lower rates of health insurance, higher rates of cost-related health needs, and higher rates of cost-related prescription non-adherence, meaning that if people cannot afford to pay their rent, they will not take their prescribed medications. When residents cannot afford to pay their rent, or when the rent payment consumes a majority of their household income, this has a negative impact on their health and well-being. Whittier Street Health Center was the first health center in Boston to be federally funded to provide primary care services to residents of public housing, addressing their health care and social services needs. We have seen firsthand the positive impact of safe and affordable housing. However, 49% of Whittier's patients live below the poverty level, and 90% live below 200% of the poverty level, making it challenging for them to pay their rents and sometimes having to make the difficult decision to move out of Boston. In our primary service area of Roxbury, where we are today, a 2017 Boston Public Health Commission report noted that over 82% of residents in Roxbury were renters, and 56% paid more than 30% of their income. The rates in Roxbury have contributed to a higher level of housing instability for families and student transiency in the public schools, and we know the pandemic has widened this gap. Boston is described as an unforgiving rental market for families who are impoverished, as well as for middle-income families, and has the longest length of stay among families who receive emergency assistance compared to other regions in the Commonwealth. The continued issues related to rent insecurity and the financial burden of the pandemic has caused families to be priced out of the housing market in Boston. We thank Mayor Wu for her leadership on this critical issue that will help to improve the health and economic equity of all residents in Boston. Thank you, Mayor Wu. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Wu to the podium.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to Frederica and your entire team here at Whittier for hosting us once again. We have had now several events here because of the many ways in which you've been just an incredible partner for us, and I can't wait to see that the work that comes out of all of these partnerships, whether continued on the public health and fighting the pandemic and making sure we're prepared, or in illuminating and lifting up the many ways in which health is tied to housing stability and food access and transportation access and climate justice that we know you are lifting up with the work that your team does here. I want to acknowledge many members today here of our newly established working group on rent stabilization for the City of Boston. Thank you so much for your service and willingness to help. You will hear shortly from a few of our advisory committee members on behalf of the larger group, but I wanted just to thank everyone for being willing to invest the time and for coming to the table from all different perspectives, all different professions, all different life experiences, but with a shared drive to make sure that we can help support renters in Boston and help take steps forward as a city to stabilize our communities in this crisis of displacement and a very tough housing market. I want to thank also our elected colleagues who are here, State Representative China Tyler, State Senator and Councilor Lydia Edwards, State Representative Nika Lugardo, and of course former City Councilor Josh Stakem, who's also in here as his committee member hat. And I'll invite the elected officials to speak after our committee members and Chief of Housing. This is, of course, an effort and an initiative that will take strong partnership across all sectors of our city and across all levels of government to truly make a difference and make transformational change in our housing market. This is the #1 concern on residents' minds all across our city. How we will afford to stay, how we can make ends meet when housing prices continue to go up and the needs are so great coming out of this pandemic. As you heard, the majority of Boston residents are renters, and our renters are rent burdened. It is unsustainable how much our residents and families are having to scrape together just to make rent, often at the expense of food security, of other basic needs, of health care, and everything that our families deserve as a baseline. And so we are looking to build on the work that we're doing on every other, from every other tool in city government to tackle this challenge of housing costs in Boston. Not only are we launching a committee and working group that will study, make recommendations, and really tie the learnings that we have nationally with cities who are moving forward very successful rent stabilization policies to the specific situation and neighborhood by neighborhood data on what's happening in Boston. But in addition, we're also continuing to invest in creating more affordable housing, in showing that supportive housing is central to our needs when it comes to the opiate crisis and mental health and residents who are unhoused. And I see many of our service providers in that space here with St. Francis House, Pine Street Inn, and others, as well as our affordable housing partners here. We are going to make housing stability the foundation of our recovery. That is where the bulk of our federal ARPA funds are intended to go. And we will continue to engage on how we can put the resources, change the processes, take down barriers, invest in home ownership, so that all throughout our city we are modeling what it means to change the possibilities for owning a home, having that security, and accessing all that comes with housing: health, opportunity, safety, and community. So I will pass it on now to two of our committee members. First, Mimi Ramos, our advisory committee member, also the executive director for New England United for Justice, followed by Curtis Kemeney, the CEO and president of Boston Residential Group. Oh, wait, sorry, I should do that. Okay, lo siento, un poco en español primero. Estamos aquí porque es un día para anunciar la comité sobre la idea de estabilización de renta. Esta es una idea popular. Hace unos 30 años los votantes de Boston querían la estabilización de renta y hoy en día todavía sigue siendo el caso. Más del 75% de los votantes de Boston apoyan el control de renta. Hoy estamos anunciando los miembros de nuestro comité, inquilinos, profesores, sindicalistas, activistas de la vivienda, grandes desarrolladores, pequeños propietarios, expertos y académicos. Pueden registrarse para nuestra primera reunión pública en boston.gov/rent. Y estamos haciendo algo diferente con este comité. Forma parte de una estrategia más amplia. La estabilización de renta no es la única solución a nuestra crisis de vivienda. Tenemos que hacer más para aumentar la oferta de viviendas. Seguiremos haciéndolo, pero también tenemos que tomar medidas para mantener a la gente en sus casas a corto plazo. Exige una respuesta regional. Entonces tenemos que hacer todo lo posible para mantener a las familias en sus hogares y estabilizar nuestras comunidades. Gracias. Okay, now Mimi.
Thank you, Mayor Michelle Wu. This is really a beautiful and exciting opportunity. My name is Mimi Ramos. I am the executive director with New England United for Justice, but I am here representing Right to the City Boston and many, many housing justice advocates that have been working for years around the conversation around what is it going to take to stabilize our city. So I will keep these comments brief because I think we have heard the agenda that many of us support from the mayor around this really important conversation. This is an opportunity to bring the brilliance and the expertise around this very important issue to the table. It'll be an opportunity to learn, to share, and not to talk about what's not possible, but to dream about what is possible and to bring solutions that are grounded from our communities across the city together to have an honest conversation about what I consider the civil rights issue of our time. Housing is an important issue. It is a human right, and we all deserve a home. It is the center and connection of schools, our health, good jobs, our land, and we have an opportunity to shape what that future is going to look like together. So we are really excited to be a part of this journey, to continue the learnings and conversations, and to really push ourselves to think outside the box, be bold, and bring those solutions to reality. So I'm really excited to be a part of this with all of the members of our team. This is going to take an investment of time and energy, but one that I know that we are all committed to because our families deserve us, the time and the attention that it's going to take to make sure that housing continues to be affordable and accessible to all. So thank you, Mayor Wu, and thank you, everyone. I look forward to being a part of this conversation. Thank you.
Need my glasses. Hi, everybody. I'm Curtis Kemeney, the CEO of Boston Residential Group. We are a market rate housing developer in the city. and I'm delighted to be here and to be a member of this committee. Mayor Wu, elected officials, Chief Dillon, guests, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this conversation and be a member of the Rent Stabilization Advisory Committee. I really appreciate the city's effort to ensure there's broad representation from the industry and the advocacy community to debate this important issue. We all agree that housing equity and affordability is a very important issue for our city. Housing creation of all types, including affordable housing, is critical to our competitiveness on the national and global scale. While a highly controversial concept, the term rent stabilization can be defined in many different ways. The concept deserves careful consideration and thoughtful debate in the context of creating a toolkit of ideas that the city might deploy as it faces the affordable housing challenge. We'll make progress on the issue when we can have a constructive dialogue and the open exchange of ideas. All parties must work together if we're to find compromise solutions that can have real impact on the ground. All the affected constituents hold deeply held beliefs, and there are real constraints associated with this issue. All deserve respect and fair consideration. I bring to this committee an open mind, and I look forward to listening carefully and engaging honestly with all the committee members, and trust that they do too. Our metric of success, in my view, is engaging in a fair and balanced process that helps advance our thinking and potentially has a positive impact on one of our city's most pressing issues. I look forward to getting to work. Thank you.
And now I'll invite up our Chief of Housing, Sheila Dillon.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for everyone for being here. So I'll be brief, but many years ago, the residents of Massachusetts, not Boston, made a decision that Boston's rent stabilization program should no longer exist. And for decades, many of you, because I've worked alongside of you, have worked hard to mitigate this decision by building more affordable housing and protecting many of our residents from displacement. Without your actions, and I thought about this long and hard this morning, housing issues would be worse and Boston would be a very different place. However, as Boston's housing costs continue to rise and displacements continue, it's time for us to acknowledge that rent stabilization is needed, not just for our residents, but as the mayor mentioned as well, for our neighborhoods and our communities, which have been destabilized by real estate speculation. So to come up with a rent stabilization program that works for Boston, for renters and owners, the mayor has assembled a talented group of professionals to guide us as we outline a new rent stabilization program. And I'm always struck by the talent that is in Boston, the talent that has really been calling nonstop, wanting to participate. So even if you aren't on this task force, there will be many, many opportunities to hear from the public, to hear from the development community. And we will pencil those in and really listen with open ears and open minds. So let me now acknowledge the advisory. As the list is long, I'm not going to say their titles, but just where they hail from. Emma Anderson, Boston Teachers Union; Kathy Brown, Boston Tenant Coalition; Joe Byrne, the Regional Council of Carpenters; Karen Chen, Chinese Progressive Association; Emilio Dorsley from Urban Edge; Dermot Doyne, landlord and business owner in Mission Hill; Chris Hebert, Harvard Joint Center for Housing at Harvard; Bea He Mazin, Abundant Housing Massachusetts; Michael Kane, HUD Tenant Alliance; Brian Kavugian, National Development; Curtis Kemeney, Boston Residential Group; Joe Kreisberg, MACDC, Mass Association of Community Development Corporations; Denise Matthews Turner, City Life; Lisa Owens, Himes Foundation; Jean Pinato, Colliers International; Mimi Ramos, New England United for Justice; Dr. Megan Sandell, Boston Medical Center; Chanda Smart, Onyx Development; Lauren Song, Greater Boston Legal Services; Justin Steele, MIT; Carolyn Villers, Mass Senior Action Council, and Josh Zakum from Housing Forward. Once again, I really want to thank this impressive group from many disciplines for agreeing to do this. And before I close and hand it back over to the mayor, I did just want to acknowledge the mayor's policy staff, Tolly Robbins and Maya Getter, for their assistance on this important effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it over to colleagues in government now, starting with State Rep China Tyler.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out today. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you so much, Mayor Wu, for recognizing me and for uplifting our city's shared vision for a new Boston. As a chairwoman of the Massachusetts Black and Latino Caucus, as a collective, we fight so hard because housing is something that we understand. It's our lived life experience, and unfortunately, we continue to witness the displacement of so many individuals, children, and families. But we also experience the difficulties of navigating the development process so we can comfortably add on to a city that we all know and love. So, to the Rent Stability Task Force, thank you so much for your commitment and for stepping up to this charge. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to supporting you throughout this mission. Because balancing the accessibility and affordability of our housing stock is a very difficult task, as you all know, but we will not stop trying. On Beacon Hill, we recognize this as an emergency, and we are committed to partners in this uphill battle that we all face. We will continue to provide funding for emergency shelter relief, rental support, home ownership support, and last and certainly not least, our financial supports to build new housing. This is the first, actually as the first filer of the Jim Brooks Stabilization Act back in 2017, we learned pretty quickly that we had a lot of work to do. So with that in closing, I'm here to support Mayor Wu for this very thoughtful and innovative approach as to how we address this issue topic. And please know that our supporters on Beacon Hill and the legislators on Beacon Hill will be here in the fight to the end. So thank you so much.
Senator Lydia Edwards.
It's just an honor to be here today to discuss and to see Mayor Wu continue to grow and move in this area that she ran on. I want to be clear, what's not up for debate is the mandate that she received and the city received when she ran on rent control. She ran on that and she won on that. And I think it's important for us to center that this conversation is part of her fulfilling many of her promises already to our communities about how we're going to keep people here in the city of Boston. It's very important that we talk in those terms. It's not up for debate that the rents are out of control. It's not up for debate that we have created this problem and only we can fix this problem. It's not up for debate anymore. If we want this city to thrive, if we want to have a city that involves people of all races, that it has people of different class levels, if we want that city, and that's the city that Mayor Wu ran on, and that's the city that I live in, then we need to have rent stabilization. I want to thank the committee members already for your commitment, many of whom I've known for years before I was in politics. Many of you were folks either I went to in legal services or work with as colleagues, or I took clients from some of your organizations when I was defending and working on workers' rights and domestic workers. So I want you to know these committee members, their hearts are in the right place. Their brains have already been there. They have the creativity, and I want to thank so many of them who greeted me when I became the director of the Office of Housing Stability with a list of ideas. Okay, you got a to-do list for me, which included the Jim Brooks Act that we helped to write. It included TOPA. It included so many different things that are still pending at the State House. And Boston, as we know, is not an island. If Boston can help and fix and stabilize this housing market, the whole state can. As a regional now representative, as a senator that I represent 4 cities actually right now, we know that if we all come together on a regional focus, we will be able to resolve this issue. We cannot do this by ourselves. There is no one particular stakeholder that has it all. So I look forward to debating in academics about this, but in terms of the committee, y'all get to work. And as far as the State House is concerned, I'm going to get to work. We're receiving the transfer fee soon, and we're going to continue to fight for TOPA, as I mentioned, the Homes Act, and also the local option for rent control. So thank you.
State Representative Nika Elugardo.
Thank you, Mayor Wu, for your leadership and for following through on every word you spoke, not only in your campaign, but since you've been elected. I want to thank Ms. Frederica also. This is my home. This was my health center. And I arrived here because my sister, who was experiencing housing instability, and her 4 children were in danger of being taken from her because of a mental health crisis. So my husband and I moved her in with us. We had to find an apartment that could fit 4 kids, plus our college daughter at the time, and my husband and myself, very expensive. We went into deep debt to make sure that my sister could have health care and housing, because we didn't have the support services from government that we needed for that. And we had to dig into our family deep. We had to delay buying a home. Being really the wealthiest people in the generations of our family, we had to delay buying a home for another 4 years. We just bought that home last year. But as my sisters in service and the members of the committee have put forward, we can do much better. We can provide a strong safety net. We have the resources to do that. That's why I and my colleagues here, I personally am the filer of several rent stabilization bills, and everybody here has had my back on that, and I have your back, Mayor Wu. We want to give Boston the ability, the flexibility, and the tools to do whatever we need to do to meet the housing crisis where it is, because as has been said more eloquently by a number of other people, housing intersects with every other area of life. I told my story not just because I want to tell my story, but to demonstrate that when we lift up the people that are the most vulnerable, we lift all of us up. It's not just the people that are vulnerable that suffer because of the injustices that we allow to continue. So as we begin to dismantle these injustices, it's not for a them, it's for all of us. Because those very people are the ones with the solutions that we need to make this city thrive, and that's why I'm so grateful that the advisory committee represents folks that I have known from afar and up close for decades in the work that we've done on housing and asset development for people who are most vulnerable, and that has continued to bring the entire city and state up, and we will fight hard for you with the mayor's leadership at City Hall and on Beacon Hill. Thank you.
Any questions from the media for anyone up here? Allison?
I'm wondering if someone, or perhaps you, Mayor, could just sort of, for people who don't know what rent stabilization is, like, how do you describe what this is, maybe how it would happen, and maybe what the biggest challenge is for someone who actually, is a proponent of it?
Sure. I'll say at a very high level, and then there are folks who have been in the trenches on this for decades to fill in. At a very high level, what you need to know is that several decades ago, every city in Massachusetts was stripped of the right to be able to have any policy say or action regarding rents. And the many ways in which we can address other issues and challenges that our constituents are facing, such as small businesses or public health or on the environmental side or schools, our hands are tied right now because of that ballot initiative and therefore state action. Rent stabilization or rent control, as you heard, means any number of a range of things. There are very different configurations of it in different cities around the country, but the basic idea is that we should have the policy tools to be able to impact and influence rents among the many other ways that we are trying to address our housing crisis. And so to complement what we're doing to increase the supply of housing, to speed up the processes for affordable housing, to boost home ownership, we are looking to very thoughtfully craft a policy that can match the efforts already ongoing at the State House to give cities more flexibility and authority to help our residents. The goal of this committee will be to, one more word on rent control and stabilization. So for some, the two terms mean different things. I kind of use them interchangeably, but it could mean either setting specific rents or capping the amount that people pay. It could mean putting parameters around how quickly rents can go up, and that's the model that we see in many of the cities that are instituting this around the country right now. It could mean anywhere in between as well. And so this committee will meet monthly with our teams, Chief Dillon and the Office of Housing. Maya from our policy shop is going to be the number one contact here. And we have already begun to set up a curriculum for everyone to start from the same place of facts. And so we will really do some deep reading, learning, invite other cities to share their experiences as well, and also do some deep learning data analysis on the city of Boston neighborhood by neighborhood. And the goal is between now and the next legislative session up at Beacon Hill to thoughtfully craft a policy that serves Boston well in what we need in this moment. Mayor. Anyone add anything on? Okay, all right.
Can you repeat that in Spanish?
Okay. Sure. Let me try to remember what I said. En este momento, el problema de la crisis de la renta y el costo de vivienda es una barrera para cada barrio, para muchas familias en Boston. Entonces, en este momento, estamos creando un comité para estudiar, para hablar con la comunidad y otras ciudades con la política sobre el control de la renta o estabilización de la renta, y vamos a proponer una política en la próxima sesión de la legislatura estatal sobre la política que Boston necesita. La diferencia entre varias políticas es grande. En unas ciudades es una cuestión de establecer el nivel de renta, y otros lugares es una sugerencia sobre la aumentación de la renta. Entonces, en Boston necesitamos un proceso con cada perspectiva de las activistas, la comunidad, de empresas de desarrollar y academia. Y entonces, cada mes tenemos una discusión con los expertos de la comunidad y otros lugares para comprender la situación verdaderamente y también proponer la respuesta que necesitamos. Do you want to add anything? Other questions from media? Are we good? Oh, yes.
Would you be using any more funding from the ARPA to kind of allocate or expand more programs when it comes to, rent stabilization or anything like that? En español.
Okay. En este momento tenemos una oportunidad con los fondos federales de ARPA y es una combinación de todas las maneras de apoyo. En este caso, la comité es solamente un proceso de estudiar y comprender y proponer una política, entonces no necesita los fondos adicionales sin los esfuerzos de nuestro equipo, por ejemplo, Maya, del equipo de política y el equipo de Chief Dillon de Oficina de Vivienda. Pero al mismo tiempo, Boston ha anunciado la inversión en viviendas asequibles en Boston. Por ejemplo, en Mildred Haley, una inversión de $50 millones para las casas y las condiciones de viviendas asequibles ahora en Boston. Y tenemos también un plan de invertir en el propietario de ownership de vivienda también. Sheila, what else do you want to add about ARPA funding? And I could try to translate.
That means I knew what you said. No, I agree with whatever the mayor said. We are going through, we're having lots of discussions right now about the ARPA funding. We do see it as a great opportunity to increase money for our housing programs, but also to look at how do we take this one-time money and do things differently so we can demonstrate and use them as models for how to move forward. So more to come on that, and certainly we're going to have more dialogue with the community and our elected officials. Thank you.
And do you see it plugging directly into rent stabilization, of the opportunities for use that money towards this initiative?
Rent stabilization, we are looking at how we keep, right now we are funding, and the state is as well, a lot of resources to families that were hard hit through the pandemic and helping them pay their rent and stay current on their rent. And our eviction numbers are very, very low right now. So we are looking at how do we keep federal money in those programs so we can continue. And we are also talking to our budget director about increasing the amount of actual housing vouchers we have in the city to complement the federal program. So there will be more federal money and more city money going into rent relief and rent programs. Thanks. Thank you.
What would it look like to compensate committee members?
So we are very grateful to our volunteer committee members. So the budget is love and gratitude and some meals, right? So no, I mean, in all seriousness, this is an issue that the city very much needs to grapple with, that we have so much energy to be part of important policy decisions and changes, and there are very serious financial barriers for volunteer time for many in our community. And so in this instance, we are incredibly grateful to our committee who have agreed to do this as volunteers, but it is something structurally that we need to be addressing in terms of setting aside the funding so that we can truly make this financially accessible to everyone. Okay, and I want to just open, oh yes.
I have one real quick.
Yes.
I think my colleague reporter over here was talking about what ARPA money could be used for, to subsidize rent control, rent stabilization in the future. I know that's way out, but are we talking about a subsidized form of rent control? And if so, where would that money come from?
Well, it's really up to the committee to explore all possibilities and to offer the suggestions and potential legislation that we could go ask for approval from the State House for. I would say that in many ways across the city, we are already subsidizing rent control to some extent, in that the city has been able to already use federal funds and in the past has helped finance developments and new housing that therefore have deed restrictions built into it so that the rents are below market from then on. We have seen some of the other ARPA funds already invested in that way as well. And then there are also opportunities to be really creative about financing. So there's really no limits to what this group is empowered to discuss and put forward. There have been suggestions of, could we leverage the city's bond rating to be more of a partner in financing affordable housing? Could we support a version of a subsidy monthly, but for home ownership? A municipal voucher for home ownership. We already, thanks to the leadership of some here, Michael Kane and others, have implemented city-funded rental vouchers for residents, and so that there's been a small pool of funds that has been used for that over a few years, but all manner of suggestion is on the table.
What kind of timeline are you looking for?
So the committee will meet monthly, and Chief Dillon and the policy team have already laid out the curriculum for the syllabus, if you will, of month by month what some of the proposed topics would be and the suggested learnings and readings for each one. Our goal, the legislative session is already well underway. We came into office halfway through the legislative session up on Beacon Hill, and so rather than try to rush something through, and there's already many proposals already on the table at the state level, the goal is to, over the next few months, put together a proposal that would be ready for next legislative session in 2023.
Mayor, I'm sorry, one more question. I know a lot of your supporters are thrilled that you're taking that money, that federal money, and plugging it into some of your progressive initiatives and, free bus or whatever, housing. Boston sort of has the luxury to do that versus other cities that are kind of taking that money and plugging in budget holes?
Yeah, we are a city that is built on sound financial management over many years. In many ways, the city has prioritized paying down our long-term debt. Every year in the budget, as the council would review it, there was some $40 million set aside to pay down our long-term pension liabilities, and putting us in a very different spot relative to other cities in terms of our long-term debt and obligations. But we also, for good and bad, are very reliant as a city on property taxes to fund our municipal budget. Over 70% of the budget, the current fiscal year budget, is from property taxes paid by residents and by commercial buildings. And that means that in times of shock, we are not less reliant on sources like the sales tax or others that might ebb and flow with the economic situation. But it also means a very large burden is being put on our property owners and residents here in Boston that we need to find a way to diversify over the long term as well. So there are many strands here, and we're very lucky in Boston. It also means that we need to be very intentional about how we identify sources that are for sustainable revenue moving forward as well. Is there anyone from the committee who didn't speak who wants to offer something? Karen.
If I may add, I think the question around rent stabilization, I think Frederica said earlier, quoting the number of people who are actually paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. But actually the problem in Boston, I think probably throughout Massachusetts, that if your income is lower in a lower bracket, actually you're paying more portion of your income towards rent. So when we're talking about addressing, rent stabilization, we need to correct this problem, because based on the national low income research is saying that each year they come out with a report, you have to make $36 in order to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, but right now the minimum wage is at $14.25. So it's so I think it's thinking about how do we make sure that the housing that we are producing is actually keeping people in their homes. And then also at the same time, looking into other issues that help people achieve economic mobility. And then I think that, we are very familiar with the term of house poor, but also it's what we're really talking about rent stabilization is people are home poor, and we need to fix that.
Anyone else want to offer anything? Good? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good. I'll engage with you.